Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekly reading report. It's time for my weekly reading report, that thrill-packed program where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. And I did read some stuff, although the previous week, Roger, was a disaster. Last week, nothing went according to plan. It was one of those weeks. Or going into it, I thought this is going to be a pretty easy week. No, it was not. It was Roger, it was a disaster. And yeah, nothing went according to plan. So this might be a shorter reading report than usual. We'll see. But I did read a couple things. So let's talk about those things. I will break out my list for the 500 book challenge. The challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones. And I think the last book that I put on here for last week was book 310, which was the Fantastic Four Nobody Gets Out Alive, which was a Fantastic Four epic collection. So we are on book 311. So book 311, Roger, was this book, The Last Planet by Andre Norton. And I had just started this last week. And so you could see just how awesome it is with our, mighty Space Patrol members walking around with this deadly robot. So the robots in this book, the Hunter Patrol robots, are very dangerous, but not according to this cover. I mean, he doesn't look too terrifying, but it's a great cover. And man, this book is really, really good. I was very pleasantly surprised by just how good this book was. It's excellent. So The Last Planet by Andre Norton. Andre Norton, who's written a million books. She wrote a lot of science fiction books. A lot. And she'll never be up there with Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke or any of them. But she was a really good writer, actually. And she never disappoints me. I always seem to enjoy the Andre Norton books that I read, and I really, really enjoyed this one, which is a central control novel about the Space Patrol, and this happens in the far distant future where human beings have been out in space for years and years and years. Earth is just a distant memory. But the great galactic empire is kind of falling apart and it's breaking up. And Central Control has lost most of its control. And one of the leaders of Central Control wants to make himself an emperor or something, but he needs to get rid of the space patrol to do it. So he orders the Space Patrol, what's left of them, to go on a deep space mission to discover new worlds and discover a place where they could sort of, bring themselves back as a great power. But really, he just wants to get rid of them, which is what he does. And the ships are all, falling apart in the Space Patrol, and there's not enough people left to fix them. They are a shadow of what they once were, although they are still very proud, the Space Patrol. And one of the ships in the Space Patrol, I'm forgetting the name of the ship, because the poor ship didn't last long. Starfire. The ship Starfire has gone through some hard times and some battles and things, and it crash lands on a mysterious planet. And it is damaged beyond repair. So it looks like for this little group of the Space Patrol, it is the last planet. It's the last planet for them. It's on an unexplored, uncharted planet. Nobody's probably ever going to find them. And so what do? And on this ship, in the Space Patrol ship, there are a group of Rangers, the Star Rangers. So the Rangers are part of the patrol, but they're kind of separate. And one of the interesting things that Andre Norton does in this book she puts a lot in this book about racial prejudice, which was starting to be seen as a really, really big problem in the 1950s when this book was written. And I thought that was a really interesting angle because the way she does it is the prejudice is against non-humans. And in the Star Rangers, you have some non-humans, and even the humans in the Star Rangers are kind of weird. Our main character is a character called Carter, starts with a K, Carter, and he's our hero. And even he's a little weird because he's from this barbaric planet, and he has ESP. He has ESP powers, which makes everybody else nervous who knows about the fact that he has ESP powers. And then there's this other guy who comes from a planet that's always dark. And so when it's bright outside, he has to wear goggles, and his hair is all white and his skin is pale. He's cool. And then we also have a lizard guy, and we also have a bird guy. So, a bunch of aliens, and they're looked on as outsiders. And this becomes a problem because on this planet, there's a city, an old city, an ancient city that has been abandoned by whoever made it. And there are robots running around the city. But in this city that has been abandoned by the people who made the city, there is another group of castaways, another group of survivors. And the main leader of this group of survivors is an evil villain. He's an evil villain who wants to take control of everything on the planet. And so our Star Rangers and our Space Patrol has to deal with this guy who's a villain. And at first he's all ingratiating and stuff, and he's like, yeah, come and join me. But he actually just wants to be an evil dictator. And we have trouble. We have some trouble for our castaways on this book, and it's fantastic. This book is really, really enjoyable. A nice, quick 1950s science fiction novel. The only thing that doesn't work in this book is the ending. The ending sucks, frankly. We had a great book right up until the very end, and then the very end has this really kind of pat, it feels almost tacked on, happy ending, which, was disappointing. But up to that point, this book was fantastic, and I highly recommend it. It's been reprinted in paperback a bunch of times, although from the covers that I've seen, this is still the best cover. So yeah, The Last Planet by Andre Norton. Highly recommend it. Like I said, every time I pick up an Andre Norton book, I enjoy them. So there you go. There's that. That was book 311, which brings us to book 312, which was The Werewolf of Pon. The Werewolf of Pon by H. Warner Munn. It says on the cover, inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, although that's not exactly true, although it kind of is. H.P. Lovecraft just mentioned once, hey, how come nobody has written a werewolf story from the point of view of the werewolf? Which I guess at this point that hadn't happened. So H. Warner Munn, a writer, a pulp writer at the time, said, yeah, I'll write a werewolf story from the werewolf's point of view. And so he did, which was the story The Werewolf of Pon. H. Warner Munn is an author I enjoy quite a bit when I could find his stories. He doesn't have a lot of books out there. Not a lot of books in print, that's for sure. But, I come across his stories once in a while in different anthologies, and I usually enjoy them quite a bit. I bought this book years and years ago. I must have been probably a teenager when I bought it, and I did buy it used. And I got it, of course, because of that great cover, which has Oliver Reed on it from The Curse of the Werewolf. They just used a still from that movie to paint this cover. But this story is nothing like that movie, which disappointed me when I read the story. the first time. I didn't particularly like the story all that much when I first read it, and there are two stories in this book. There's the Werewolf of Ponkert, and there's the sequel, The Werewolf's Daughter. And the Werewolf of Ponkert appeared in Weird Tales magazine in 1928, and then the Werewolf's Daughter was also in 1928, I believe, but it was a three-part serial because it's a longer story. And I remember not liking The Werewolf's Daughter all that much because there wasn't really a werewolf in it. It was just about the werewolf's daughter. There is we have a character in this book who's a werewolf who kind of shows up in the background here and there, but he doesn't do any werewolf stuff. So I remember finding that very disappointing when I first read it. Although reading it this time, I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very good. I particularly liked the first story, The Werewolf of Ponkert, which is an excellent werewolf story about a guy who just has the tough luck of running into a pack of werewolves. And we have the leader of this pack of werewolves, who's this ancient being who is immortal. And he's the werewolf master, you know. And he tells him, hey, we can either eat you or you can become part of our pack. And you will have to spend your nights roaming around with us, eating other people and taking their stuff. So these werewolves are a bunch of thieves. The main guy, he's not a thief. He doesn't care about, you know, gold and jewels and all that stuff. He just wants blood that will keep him alive. But the other werewolves in the pack are like, yeah, we can kill people and take their stuff. They're a bunch of thieving werewolves. And so this guy really has no choice but to join the thieving werewolves, which he does quite against his will. But it's either that or he gets eaten. And he just, you know, he's got a wife, he's got an infant daughter. He feels like he's got to stick around even if he's a werewolf. Unfortunately, his werewolf shenanigans do eventually get him into trouble. His wife ends up thinking he's cheating on her because he's always sneaking out in the middle of the night. You know, he's just being a werewolf, but she thinks he's cheating, which, you know, that would be even worse, Roger, I guess. It's actually probably not. It's probably not worse. You know, I don't know. So he gets in trouble, and he has a terrible demise, which I will not spoil. It's pretty bad, though. Which leads into the sequel story, The Werewolf's Daughter, which actually takes up most of the book. Most of this book is The Werewolf's Daughter because that's a much longer story, which is the story of his daughter. Now, this guy, the Werewolf of Ponkert, he's very famous because the only thing that ever happened in this little European village of Ponkert is that there was a werewolf who ran around and ate people. And so this guy is famous because he's famous for being the werewolf. And his wife is dead, and so the little daughter is being raised by an old soldier. And everybody thinks the daughter is a witch because she was the werewolf's daughter. And so basically they blame her for everything. You know, a cow dies, they blame her. The crops don't come in, they blame her. Everything they blame her for. So everybody hates her. But they're afraid of the old soldier because he's got a big-ass sword and he's really, really tough. So they can't really do anything because, you know, the old soldier will kick their asses. And one day a band of gypsies, because you always have to have the obligatory band of gypsies in werewolf stories, I guess, show up. And there's a young man from France, actually, who meets the werewolf's daughter is instantly in love. And so we have a bit of a love story here. That evil master werewolf who controlled all the werewolves in the last story is still hanging around. He's in the background, you know, hanging around. But eventually a terrible thing happens, and that is that this old soldier eventually becomes crippled. We're not sure why. I don't remember that they ever said why this happened. But he is temporarily at least crippled. and is unable to protect his daughter. And this is exactly the time when all the angry villagers decide, hey, let's kill the werewolf's daughter. And so we have that going on. Actually, it's a really, really good story. Even though there's not a lot of werewolf stuff going on, there are some other supernatural things happening in the story. Although the supernatural is actually pretty light. If you think of most Weird Tales stories, there are ghosts that show up a little bit here and there. The ghost of the werewolf's daughter, the ghost of the werewolf's daughter's father, excuse me, her werewolf father, kind of shows up a little bit in this book, possibly. There's some of that. Like I said, there is a werewolf in this story, but he never really does any werewolf things. He's just hovering in the background. But it's really, really good. I was pretty impressed by it. It's not the best story ever from Weird Tales, but it was good. So I really enjoyed the Werewolf of Pon a lot more than I thought I would. The reason I picked this up is because recently I was in a discussion video, which was done by the Robert E. Howard Foundation. And Robert E. Howard's werewolf stories came up in that discussion, including Wolf's Head, his big werewolf story. And this was cited as being a major influence on that story, which I believe it was. I just don't see a lot of similarities between the Werewolf of Pon and Wolf's Head. I myself do not see a ton of similarities between those two stories. But yeah, I'm sure Robert E. Howard read it and was probably inspired to write a werewolf story of his own. I really, really liked his werewolf story. His werewolf story was really good. But not too similar, I thought. But this was excellent. Werewolf of Pon. And this is an old Time Life. This was the Time Life series of books from Centaur Books, which was a small press. And every once in a while, you'll see these Time Life books. Time Lost, excuse me, not Time Life. Time Lost books. Every once in a while, you'll see these old paperbacks hanging around. Pick them up. They're always worth picking up. And this one definitely is. So yeah, there you go. The Werewolf of Pon. I really liked that book. And that was book number 312. Now, those are the only two books that I read this week, or that I finished this week. I have been reading, of course, this as well, the Fantastic Four, Atlantis Rising, which is the 24th epic collection in the Fantastic Four, which covers stories from 1994 to 1995. I am reading every issue of the Fantastic Four from the first run of the Fantastic Four, which ran from 1961 until 1996. And I'm almost done. But this week I did not get a chance to read much comic book anything. I was going to read Superman. I didn't. I just didn't read much. And so I am on issue 399 of the Fantastic Four, almost at issue 400. Here we have an evil watcher. There was an evil watcher running around causing trouble in the mid-90s on the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards is still missing, although he is on the cover of this issue, although he's probably a fake Reed Richards, because there's a bunch of alternate evil versions of Reed Richards running around in the Fantastic Four at this time. So I'm going to be reading a lot more of this today so I can catch up. I've got this and one more epic collection of the Fantastic Four, and then I'm moving on to Spider-Man. I was going to pick up, as you all know, Varney the Vampire, but I didn't, Roger. Didn't pick it up. No time. What a shock. No, I didn't read any more Varney this week. I will. I'll read more Varney. But right now I'm reading this. Yes, it's more Spider. It's the Spider. It's the Robot Titans of Gotham. So this is awesome because, for two reasons. One of the reasons I picked this up out of my collection of books is just because I love the cover. It's this genuine Steranko cover. And this is a Bane book. And they reprinted in this book 2 Adventures of the Spider from the old Spider Pulp magazine. And also there's a story called The Octopus in here by Norvell Page, which is supposed to be a crazy story. So I'm going to read The Octopus as well in this. So these are like I said, a couple spider novels. They're supposed to be really, really good ones are in this. And so which spider novels are included? We've got Satan's Murder Machines, The Death Reign of the Vampire King, and The Octopus. Yeah, so you can't go wrong with a spider. So yeah, I'm reading more of that. And look at those cool robots. We've got killer robots in the first story, Satan's Murder Machines. Those are Satan's murder machines right there. And of course, the lady of the manor saw me reading this, and the first thing she said is, "That's not how you hold. Why is he holding two guns like that? You don't hold guns like that. That's not how you hold a firearm." That's the first thing she thought when she saw this fantastic cover. This cover's fantastic. So there you go. That's everything. That's all I read. And I managed to babble on for 20 minutes, so I'll shut up now. I will catch you next time.